Well done, guys. It's bang on 2 o'clock. So we're getting set for our Science in Retail poll, and we're looking at the different roles, the different ways in science plays away in retail. So I'm just going to end the poll here, guys, just so we can have a look at some of these results, just so we know who's on the webinar. I'm just going to share these results with us. So on the webinar today, do you study any STEM subjects? We've got 68% who study more than one, so multiple. Only 4% do not study any. So there we go. No problem if you're not studying STEM, but it's just interesting so we know. Can you name any STEM roles that might be used at a company like the Co-op? So we've got 56% saying they can't name any. And Ian and Danny, if we look in the chat box, here's some examples. We've got Chimney that's there saying shop database teams, networking teams, R&D. We've got cosmetic chemists, data analysts, marketing requiring STEM, stock manager, food scientist, that's a good one. Checkout person requiring STEM, which is an interesting one. Danny, I don't know if you want to tackle these now, or maybe we'll look at these in a second.
Let's go through them when we come into the kind of what is STEM, and we can talk about what that is.
Brilliant stuff. And are you looking to find a STEM-related job in the future? 72% do want to find a role within the STEM field. So that's good. Great to have that done there, guys. Thanks very much. So let me get rid of some of my windows so I can see the presentation. Good. So the agenda today, I'll take you through how you can communicate, because this might be one of the first webinars you've done with us. Then we'll have a brief introduction from our panelists. We're going to be starting with Danny. And then later we'll be going into Ian Ferguson's story, our very special guest today. And then Danny Matthews will then take us through different opportunities in STEM at the moment. So I want you to hear Ian's story. Think about how he did it and what he's learned and what experience he's gained through his career. And then I want us to look into Danny and what he's saying about what's available at the moment. And then hopefully can really help you understand different ways of getting into STEM and understanding how those routes might be in the retail industry and potentially with the Co-op. You can ask questions at any time, but at the end, there's a dedicated time where I don't want to ask any questions and it's all over to you. Hopefully you can ask the questions then. But if you do want to ask questions whenever you want, chat box is ideally not the way to do it. Chat box is what I'll ask you if we're doing any task or I want to get your opinion on stuff. If you want to ask a question, use the Q&A box. You'll find that at the top or at the bottom of your screen. Just whack in that question and I'll try and ask it to the guys whenever I can. If you do want to speak on the webinar, you can actually raise your hand, and then what I'll do, I'll unmute you, and then that means that you can speak to us. That's my preferred means of communication, because it's quite nice to hear a different voice and you can ask your question. So that's how you can communicate today. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the CEO and founder of Pathway CTM. So I was saying to you guys before Danny and Ian came on board, like we do these webinars every day at the moment over COVID-19 because it's a bit of a difficult and boring time maybe. I'm really excited about using your time at the moment to really propel and thinking about where you want to go with your career, whether that's this year, in 5 years if you're going to go to uni, next year if you're a year 12, for example, or just really thinking what you're passionate about, what you're studying maybe, or maybe where you want to go with your career. Today is all about the Co-op and it's all about STEM and retail. And over to Danny. Danny, you've done 2 webinars with us already. Last week was assessment and selection, and that was one of our best attended webinars over the 4 weeks. So you must be feeling good about today, Danny.
Wow. Yeah, let's do it. Let's get on with it. The numbers look to be really healthy and seem to be going up every time I look at it. So yeah, welcome everybody to today's webinar. My name is Danny Matthews. I work at the Co-op. I'm actually in our head office today, which is what you can see behind me. And my role, even though that's a very long-winded job title of early careers apprentice and community recruitment lead, breathe, actually in a nutshell is effectively to help both students and members of our communities of all ages, of all backgrounds, of all demographics to enter and to access employment, be that through apprenticeships, be that through placement programs from university, be that through graduate offerings, or actually be that through entry-level positions across our business within the UK. So primarily responsible for supporting people into employment and developing knowledge and skills around careers, which this absolutely fits into for certain.
Fantastic. And Danny, you brought a special guest with you today. We're going to come to Ian in a second. Is that right? Fantastic.
That's correct. Yeah.
So good stuff. So I caught you at a bad time. So Danny, over to you then. So STEM, what does it mean? Lots of students here are studying it, but what does it mean at the moment? What do you want to say here?
Yes, I think I just want to spend a bit of time just setting the context really, and just making sure that we're all on the same page. STEM is effectively an abbreviation for a collection of academic subjects, being science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And in a nutshell, you probably hear this word banded around a bit in college and school. Employers seem to use it a lot. It's always in the news as well. But really wanted to drill into what STEM actually means in the context of the UK. So around about £200 billion a year worth of value, if not more, to the UK through business primarily. But it has, the outputs of science, the outputs of research, the outputs of IT technology, the importance. So 27% of all businesses in the UK are engineering companies. So the importance, a third of all UK businesses being in that sector, and the core skills which sit around mathematics, which arguably would underpin some of, if not a lot of the roles across science, engineering, and technology. It plays a big part in our business, in our economics and the economy of the UK, but has a much bigger impact, and probably no more prominent than right now, actually. Every day you hear from our chief science officers and health officers as well across the UK, and those two individuals, along with many other people supporting the kind of the fight against COVID-19 are within STEM roles. So it's not just about, increasing the economy, increasing GDP and supporting UK business, but actually having a much bigger impact on society. And I think, Ian's got a really great story about how we at Co-op have done that through one of our products that's been developed. But the value of STEM in the UK is significant. And you might hear it from a careers perspective quite a lot. Maybe your careers leaders are talking about, getting to STEM. There actually is a larger weighting in terms of salary for teachers who are entering the teaching market, who are going into STEM subjects, because it's very well documented in the news that there's a STEM skill shortage. So the government are trying everything they can to really encourage young people into STEM careers, and it's a fantastic place. I don't necessarily work in STEM myself, but the people who I've met, the people I've worked with, who work in STEM roles or within those industries, have had really exciting and unique career pathways. And Ian's one of the individuals. But the worry for me is really that there is a skill shortage, and the estimated cost of that shortage in loss of output, in loss of productivity, it's around about £1.5 billion a year in the UK, and that's significant when you think, how much could we be contributing to business, how much could we be contributing to the economy, and most importantly, how much could we be contributing towards society and the environment if we had those skills in place within this country. And I'll come on to later, how you can access a STEM career. But today's session, I really wanted to, bring Ian on board with this and hear it firsthand around what a really interesting career pathway and varied career pathway an individual within STEM has had, and really bring to life what STEM means in the sense of careers, not just in the sense of education. So, Ian, I shall hand over to yourself.
Thank you. Right. So I'm Ian Ferguson. I'm the environment manager at the Co-op. I've been at the Co-op for 30 years, and before that, I worked for 10 years in a lab in Sheffield. So I started my career. Can we move on to the next slide, Danny?
Yeah. Just
so that people have a laugh. So that picture on the left is me getting my Bachelor of Science degree from Sheffield University. That degree in geology and botany led me into lab-based formulation work. And when I left that job, I joined the Co-op after about 10 years. And that was quality assurance work at the Co-op, checking that products are being made properly, safely, consistently. But throughout that work as a quality assurance person, a technical manager, and ethical and environmental issues were really constant through those early years at the Co-op. So I worked on things like banning animal testing in Co-op products, recycling of office paper into bathroom tissue, using safer chemicals in cosmetics and household cleaning products, and bringing natural colours into Co-op products instead of artificial colours. It's a really exciting work, and very interesting. All this resulted in the Co-op sponsoring me to do a master's degree in environmental management and technology. So studying for the master's degree gave me the analytical approach and the technical insights to move into policy work as environment manager, which is my current role. And that led into work on packaging recyclability, which is really, really topical right now. Compostable carrier bags, which we'll talk about a bit later. Food waste reduction, which is also very topical. And plastic pollution, again, very topical. So a STEM degree needn't be purely vocational. It doesn't have to aim narrowly at the application of the subject being studied. My first degree is in geology and botany, so I could have gone to work on an oil rig, or I could have gone into academia. But on the other hand, it also doesn't mean that you could only work in teaching. What it does bring is a way of thinking about issues, using evidence to support exploration of the solutions to problems, and using evidence to bring recommendations to the business for change.
Ian,
it also brings...
Ian, can I just ask a quick question on that, actually?
Of course you can, yes.
Yeah, just because students will be there thinking about going to university, maybe considering alternative routes as well. Geology and botany at Sheffield, what made you decide to go and study that in particular? Did you always have a passion? Just talk us through that decision-making process. It's really quite relevant.
I've always been interested in botany, but when I went to university, I initially was going to study chemistry because I always loved chemistry. I liked biology, but I loved chemistry. And when I got there, I had to do some subsidiary subjects, and there was a range on offer. So I had to go in geology because, outdoor. I always loved walking and outdoor stuff. So I picked that as a subsidiary subject. Now, in the first year at Sheffield at the time, which is 45 years ago, they were equally ranked. So when it came to the second year, I had a choice of which way to go. And I decided at that stage to drop chemistry and do geology, zoology, and botany. And in the final year, I dropped the zoology and concentrated on the geology and botany, which is really, really interesting stuff. Lots of outdoors engagement. So field trips to Norfolk, field trips, and my mapping area was the hills around the area where I grew up in the northeast of England, and brings a different view of the countryside as well. You start thinking about what's beneath and what's growing on top.
And Ian, just one more question before I let you continue. Thank you. What type of person would you have said that you were in school or college at the time? Now, again, I'm relating this back to the year 11s, 12s or 13s. And I was always a sports person. I couldn't sit in a biology lesson. I wouldn't know what was going on. What about you, Ian? Were you always that STEM person deep down?
Yeah, I was picked last after the fatties.
Can't have it all.
Sorry, a bit on PC. I was always picked last for games. I was useless at team games. Yes, I used to love schoolwork. I liked English language, maths. I loved sciences. I liked reading and literature, but I could never get my head around what Shakespeare was thinking when he was writing his sonnets. It just didn't mean anything to me. I liked reading, Shakespeare stuff, but analyze it. No, I couldn't do that.
No, okay, thank you. Thanks, Ian.
So should I press on now?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so as I was saying, STEM thinking brings a certain skepticism about headlines, about science in the media. It makes you dig deeper into more of the real facts. And I remember my colleague bringing, in the early days of the internet, bringing a picture of somebody with maggots growing in their head, which clearly was total nonsense, but we're able to look at it very carefully and say, no, they're maggots that grow on dead flesh, not on live flesh. It just wouldn't happen, and it just scotched the story altogether. So it's that sort of skepticism you bring to proper stories that are really relevant. You start to look at problems in the context of a whole system instead of looking at the problem in isolation. And that means you avoid making a knee-jerk response that may have unintended consequences. So my big example of this being put into practice is the famous Co-op compostable carrier bag. To most people, these are just an alternative material to ordinary plastic. But this is really a solution based on looking at two entire systems and bringing them together. So the systems are customers carrying their shopping home, which is a system in its own right, and council food waste collections, which people would recognise more readily as a system. So starting with carrying in shopping home, plastic carriers have, with some justification, been seen as an unnecessary use of resources, creating a large environmental problem. We knew that charging for carrier bags had created a huge change in shopper behaviour, an 80% drop in single-use bags because more people were using reusable bags because the charge made people think about what they were doing. Because of this, other retailers took the view that they could convert the rest of those shoppers to using reusable bags by simply removing single-use bags from sale. And once one started, the rest of the retailers followed. But I could see that this was likely to be much more complicated than just getting people to own reusable bags, because people forget them. They had to have the right size of bag to carry around with them. They had to remember to take them with them and when they went shopping, and they had to only call into a shop on a planned trip. And we thought this was going to cause unintended problems. So we tested it, and that's a really, really important STEM skill. If you've got a theory or a hypothesis, you have to test it. Otherwise, you're just going to go ahead and blunder into a major issue. So we took single-use carrier bags out of a couple of stores for a fortnight and measured bag sales and compared them with the weeks before. We also had some control stores to compare them with, which is another important STEM skill, have a control set. So customers wanted a bag, so they bought the cheapest one available and continued to forget to bring bags back. The result was that the sales of the cheapest reusable bags matched the previous week's sales of single-use bags, but with a much bigger plastic footprint. And that's the unintended consequence. You get the same number of shopping trips, but you use much more plastic. So we measured that too, of course. So just moving on to council collections. In 2010, we were asked by Oldham Council to sell compostable carrier bags in our stores in Oldham, and they were to be reused as food waste caddy liners for their food waste collections. We managed to get them into a few other councils as well, but they didn't really take off because they weren't very visible in stores, and single bags were still free. Now, after bringing in the charge for single-use bags, that made a big difference. So the idea of the compostable carrier bag is that by giving the bags a second valuable use, you save the council money, you save the customer money, and you divert more food waste from landfill, which reduces methane emissions and avoids the use of persistent plastic, and uses fewer resources in the bargain. So by bringing these two systems together, that means that we can solve the carrying the shopping home issue and help with food waste collections and reduce the overall plastic footprint in the bargain. Being involved in a STEM-oriented career doesn't mean being stuck in a lab. Although I was in a lab for a while to start with, very soon I was going out talking to customers. It also doesn't mean letting somebody else take the glory. So a STEM career almost always means variety and dealing with new things, seeing new exciting developments, and finding solutions to all sorts of problems. It can also open the door to becoming a minor celebrity like I've become. I've been on the One Show and BBC Breakfast, as well as doing a couple of other TV appearances and taking part in numerous radio interviews. I even appear as an exhibit in the Museum of Science and Industry in Manchester.
Ian, is that because of the bag?
That's because the compostable carrier bag, yes.
Wow.
So that's me with the compostable carrier bag on the right-hand side of the screen as you're looking at it. And the one in the middle is me getting my master's degree in 2007.
So you went on the one show, the BBC Breakfast Show, and what sort of questions did you get asked, and what was the reaction, I suppose, after that? What, Twitter or internally with your friends and family?
Well, I'll tell you that we got, normally on BBC Breakfast, you get a 4-minute interview slot. And it was John Kay, and I can't remember who the lady was on. It wasn't Louise Minchin. Anyway, John Kay was on, and they were really, really, it was the lady from Middlesbrough, what do you call her?
Stephanie.
Steffi, yes.
No, I can't remember the name. Anyway.
Yes. And they were really, really interested, and we got 7 minutes. And the floor team were doing the cut your throat thing, cut it, but they kept going. So the court were really, really pleased with me that day because I'd landed a major coup. It was great. Yes.
Wow. And I've just got a question here from a student called Shaw, saying it depends on what the consumer will do with the waste, I suppose, when talking about the plastic material. What would you say to that, Ian?
Sorry?
In terms of the compostable carrier bag versus plastic bags, a student just said the question here, well, it depends on what the consumer will do with the waste, for example. Did that come into your discussions and your thought process?
Yes. So we only sell the compostable carrier bags in council areas where there is food waste collection. So if there's no food waste collection, we don't sell them there at the moment. Although we are talking to government about whether we should change that position to help the government prepare for universal food waste collection, because it will help with that. So we do take a careful view of it.
No, that does make sense. And would you say this has been your greatest achievement in terms of what you've been involved with at the co-op? You say new and exciting developments. If you had to have a top 3, I wonder what they would be.
Thank you. Well, we've reduced our food waste footprint in our own operations by 27% in the past 4 years, which is a huge achievement. Made a huge impact on packaging recyclability and made major changes in packaging design with our suppliers' help to improve recyclability, which helps councils. I helped write their guidance on quite a lot of things. I've written articles for magazines. It just goes on and on and on. It's 30 years of what I think are great achievements. They're not necessarily big public achievements, but I think I've done a good job, really.
And did you ever think, just a personal question, did you ever think that someone with a bit of a intellect behind them, a bit of a passion for STEM, did you really think that you'd be able to make this much impact in your career? Never
in a million years did I think this. I think the message is the world is your oyster, and if you're prepared to look at the information, look at the evidence, and bring the idea to a business with the right amount of thinking, the right amount of evidence, you can go a long way.
It's so good to hear. And I'm not sure if you've got any more to say on this before maybe we go back to Danny, but students, remember, you can ask Ian any question whatsoever. Do put your hand up or any question you want to write and I'll read it out. Can I just come in with something else, Chris? Yeah, sure. Because I noticed in the poll there were 4% of people who didn't have STEM subjects in their studies. My packaging technologist, Rob, he's probably got STEM subjects in his GCSEs and A levels, but he came to us with experience, but his degree was in modern languages. So a non-STEM degree doesn't stop you getting into STEM as a career. It's not as easy, but it doesn't stop you. No, that's good. That's good to know, actually. And I must ask you, Ian, what was the thinking behind going and doing your master's at Manchester in environmental management and technology? Did you feel like you needed it to progress or to improve your performance on the job? A bit of both. Yeah. And what the real prompt that made me think about it was that the co-op at the time was promoting MBEs, which are actually quite expensive to do. And I didn't think an MBE was for me. But I thought, career progression would help. So I went and talked to my boss and said, "You don't want me to do an MBE. You want me to be a boffin. And if you let me do a master's degree, I can be a better boffin." and learning for its own sake. And did the co-op actually fund that themselves? I wonder. It might be a personal question, but
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Although I had to commit to staying at the co-op for a few years or pay back the money, which is normal practice.
absolutely. And I suppose one more question: if I was a student interested in STEM, thinking about potentially going down the apprenticeship route or going to university, Ian, I'm guessing you're pro-university. How much? I might be wrong, but I might be right. But how much do you think that going to uni, that going to Sheffield, going to Manchester, how that really developed and helped in your career personally?
Well, but you have to bear in mind that I went to university originally about 45 years ago, and apprenticeships then weren't like apprenticeships now. The career path that people would take an apprenticeship route would take now wasn't available. But I have a colleague at the co-op, Phil, and he went through the HND, OND HND degree route, and he's a senior technical manager. And so he's had a good career through a more practical work-based degree route rather than an academic route. So both routes are perfectly valid.
Okay, that's interesting to hear. And
It works for you, you know.
Okay, thanks, Ian. I've just got two quick questions. Oh, sorry, one's for me. Is this Zoom being recorded? That's all I can offer. Yes, it is being recorded. There we go, adding value to the session. And a good question here from Sophia. Ian, who was the first person you approached with your idea about the compostable bag?
I think it was somebody in the customer team who was working on trying to look at our carrier bag strategy in a different way, because I tend to want carrier bag strategy, so I got involved with that discussion. But then I took it away and I took it to my boss, and then we have what's called a governance process, so it has to go through various different levels. But I had to do quite a lot of maths behind it to prove that it worked for the business. And then it goes through what we call Policy Development Forum, where we develop the policy, and then we take it to the Food Policy Group, who take it on to the Food Executive. So that's the route it takes.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And Ian, just while we hand back to Danny potentially now, you might want to have a quick look at the chat box and see some of the roles that student wrote in earlier, and maybe we'll come back to those later to see if many of those roles require STEM knowledge. It might be quite good for you to have a quick look at that. Danny, before we come on to you in your next slide, you're not involved in the making of the bags and the STEM side. What does it mean to somebody in your role about the work that Ian's done and what it means to the co-op?
It's amazing. It is amazing. And actually, when you, as a colleague working for the business, and you hear about the impact that Ian and his team and the wider team in food policy have as well on our business, our customers, our members, and most importantly, the environment. For a colleague in an organisation as unique as Co-op, it really makes you proud to work for the business. And I mean, I could sit and listen to Ian all day. I think his stories are really, really interesting, and career pathways really varied. But for me, I think it really brings to light the impact that doing business the right way can have on a business, its customers, but definitely wider community and the environment piece as well.
No, brilliant. I mean, it was great to hear from my point of view. Great qualifications to go in and make a massive impact, get that master's, and make an amazing impact on the environment, and get the plaudits for it by going on the news. And it sounds pretty cool from where I sit. But what about now, Danny? What about access into STEM in the modern day in 2020?
Yes, I think from my perspective, if you look at that slide there, those in the blue line, which kind of flow across the top, are what you would deem the traditional route. And the reason I've not put subject areas on there is absolutely to Ian's point around, there isn't a specific degree route that you go down to get into a STEM career, and STEM is such a broad area. If I put the subjects down, we'd probably need magnifying glasses to read them all. But the reality is there is the traditional route. So you've got school GCSEs, and very much your mathematics and your science and your English GCSEs are really important in terms of unlocking options in terms of colleges, in terms of universities as well. You could then pursue into a kind of a college route through your sciences, through technology such as IT, and definitely becoming more popular that digital space and hard coding as such in kind of more vocational colleges. And that can unlock a real kind of variation of routes that you can go down post-college. That could be university, and that could be going in to do a very academic degree, so something like geology, botany, zoology, chemistry, biology, physics, astrology, another one, and it can also unlock more vocational degrees such as engineering, digital skills, and IT and networking as well. And through that, you can start your career. I think what I would call out on that traditional route is I've put start your career at the end there, but there's no reason why actually you couldn't look to develop your career after college. I think what I would say is if you look at the different types of roles that we offer within the STEM space, that a lot of other businesses offer within the STEM space, you often will need a level of a higher level of education, a higher level of skill and knowledge to be able to perform in those roles if you were going in after college without an apprenticeship route. So it's unusual that you would see too many people moving into that STEM space without a kind of a higher education equivalency. But STEM is so broad, you know, STEM is a really broad area, and you've got technology, which for someone who's interested in IT, you can step into your career post-college. But if someone was really interested in environmental sciences, to my knowledge, a lot of what the Environment Agency, for arguments, as one employer within that space, would be looking for would be that degree level education. Although that has changed in the past couple of years. And that brings me on to that kind of the layer which you see at the bottom there, which is the apprenticeship route. We did a session 2 weeks ago on apprenticeships, which is available to see. It's pre-recorded, and we talk about what the different levels mean. So I won't go into too much detail on that now. But one of the things I really wanted to call out was how the apprenticeship market has really changed, particularly within STEM. And actually, to Ian's point around, it's really about what's right for you. And I think it links to the way that people think and the way that people learn. Actually, if you look at something like engineering, for argument's sake, if that was civil engineering that you wanted to get into, then you can pursue apprenticeships in that space. And why wouldn't you? Because actually, civil engineering itself will test your math skills. It'll test those real STEM skills that you've developed in education. But most importantly, it is very much a vocational area of employment. And an apprenticeship will give you that vocational way of learning, that practical employability skills, knowledge and behaviours that you need to succeed in that area.
Danny, I've just got a quick question, if that's okay, because you're the man to ask this. From Reshma, good question. What are some of the key skills you look for in applications for STEM careers?
I think so. So I think on that point, it's a difficult one to answer that without playing the politician card.
Yeah, sure.
It's a difficult one to answer that one, because actually a skill set is usually applicable to a role, and the STEM area is really broad. What I would say to kind of come at that question from a slightly different angle is, it kind of came to mind as Ian was talking there. You know, science, technology, engineering and maths all require or will in some which way, shape or form require you to use logical reasoning. It require you to develop skills which will help you, develop your curiosity, will help you challenge the status quo. And it's that type of thinking, that real critical thinking, which will help you. And naturally, if you would put a career in one of those silos as such, or potentially across that STEM, that abbreviation as such, you will develop skills which will help you succeed in a specific career pathway. Be that actually a skill set for a piece of technology, or actually a skill set to be able to design products from an engineering perspective, or actually a skill set to be able to facilitate a credible and a quantifiable testing methodology for a science role. So the skill set can really change, but I think the one thing that I kind of often think about when I think about STEM is that transferable way of thinking, that logical approach to thinking, and that curiosity that's developed across all of those areas of STEM.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Danny. And Danny, I wonder, what about resources and areas that we can look at to try and maybe find out where the STEM roles are?
Yep, if you can flip to the next page.
Sure.
So I've pulled together a short list. This is by no means the definitive list of places you can find information. At the very top is our careers page. Have a look on there. There's some great colleague stories, some great insight from colleagues across our business in different roles. We don't have a vast array of videos and downloadable content on there yet, but we do have a lot of great stories and a great way for you to see actually what does STEM mean in a business which you wouldn't traditionally associate with STEM subjects as such. You've got Rate My Apprenticeship from an apprenticeship perspective, which is like TripAdvisor for apprenticeships, but they've got a wealth of kind of resources in there. I think the next one kind of speaks for itself, stem.org.uk, a really great website if you're interested in understanding what STEM is, different topical news stories on STEM, and importantly as well, different ways to access career pathways. Career Map, UCAS and Target Careers are three great job boards, job sites, career sites to really help give a bit of definition and maybe a bit of guidance as well around how do I go about my next step into STEM and starting to understand, what is that right step for me in my career, be that after school, be that after college, or be that after university.
Danny, I've just got two questions for you. So if you were good at STEM and you were passionate about it, just like Ian was with chemistry, would you be thinking, because often teachers push us, don't they? They push us to university if we're good at STEM. It happens quite a lot, I would say. Would you say you'd maybe apply for university, but then also look at these good resources that you've given us there and just try and figure out what's right for you, keeping your options open? What tips do you maybe have? It's quite a tough one, isn't it? There's so much out there.
Yeah, there's two ways you can go at this. You can go from the top or you can go from the bottom. So from the top is understand what you want to do. So for example, if somebody wants to be an environmental scientist, for argument's sake, you could apply to, or you could research courses at university. You could apply to university and go down that route. But actually, if you realise or you think that university isn't necessarily the right route for yourself, you are ready to enter the world of employment, but acknowledge that you still need to develop that knowledge, skills, and the behaviours working within that industry, then you can access a level 4 apprenticeship in environmental sciences. That doesn't mean apply for both, because being realistic from an employer's perspective, there may not be both available at the same time. Maybe there's an environmental sciences apprenticeship in June, when actually we all know that applying for university has to be done by January. So there's no reason about keeping your options open. I would always encourage people to try and find out what that end goal is and work backwards. But if you sat here now and think, I have no clue what on earth happens in 3 or 4 years' time, there's no reason why you couldn't investigate both options at this point in time. And I think that's really key for me, actually, because not everyone will know what they want to do. Yeah. But the most important thing, and I've talked about it when we were doing the assessment and selection piece, talked about when we were doing apprenticeships, it's really key to do your research. And that's not necessarily the research on that specific job, but your research on a specific career pathway or a job grouping as such.
Brilliant. And look at the end goal and work backwards. I like that. Danny, if I was a young person applying to one of your STEM roles and I said that I've been on a webinar with the likes of Ian Ferguson, let's say it wasn't with the co-op, as a recruiter, should I be putting that on my CV or should I be talking about that at interviews? Would it help?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it was something for your CV, if I'm being honest. Keep CVs really simple and straightforward. And a CV is a skills-based document usually, or an experience-based document with a little bit of knowledge in terms of academia there. But I would definitely, if when asked the question in an interview potentially, why do you want to get into this specific job or a STEM career or a food science kind of area, then definitely be referencing actually. And I would love if this webinar really sparked an interest in some students' kind of desires to go into STEM and particularly within our area of science, technology, engineering, maths. But for me, I would definitely say, bring to surface in an interview what you feel is relevant, and if that is actually you gained inspiration or information from this webinar, then yeah, reference it. Why not?
Brilliant. I've just got one more question for you, Danny, here from Olivia. Really good question. Currently, there is an understanding that girls in engineering and STEM have a possible subtle advantage over boys in similar job roles. Would you say that there is truth in this? Girls having an advantage over boys potentially there?
That's a very good question. Yeah. No one's ever asked me that. I've had that question asked the other way around, but not this way around. So I think there is an understanding. It's good to hear that the work that some businesses are doing in that space is being recognised, because it is clear in some areas of the STEM kind of economy or kind of career groups that there is a disproportionate amount of males than females, and that's not necessarily that businesses is only recruiting men. That's very much to do with the percentages of individuals who went to university in the past and so on and so forth. Is there an advantage? Not necessarily. Are there more ways which are encouraging females to get into STEM than males as such? Yes, but that doesn't mean that if you're a man or a male, you shouldn't be, you should feel disadvantaged as such. But if I was looking at getting into STEM, whether I was female or male, I would be taking every opportunity that comes my way. And if that is a female-specific STEM program, then yeah, go for it.
And just coming back to Ian, if I may, Ian.
Yes, hi, Chris.
When you did apply to go to University of Sheffield, did you have to do a sort of UCAS type application? Did you have to apply to go?
Yes, there was a same sort of application.
I just wonder, because we've got a question here, how would I make my STEM application to university stand out? Well, maybe what did you do to try and think how you stood out back in the day, and what would you give advice to those who are doing it this year, next year?
It's 45 years ago.
I know, I'm sorry about the question, but I just wondered if I thought I'd put it to you.
I could talk about the master's degree application. That's a bit more recent.
Please.
I talked a lot about the work I'd done at the co-op. I think what we get in job applications is very relevant. Is the things you're passionate about worth talking about? Put them into context with the application and the relevancy application, but also talking a bit about what you do beyond the academic subjects and your interest beyond that, to show that you're a rounded person. I think that's probably quite important.
Okay, brilliant. Danny, you're nodding there?
Yeah, I think that's really critical actually, because the pulling out of the rounded person as such, the kind of sharing about your personality, sharing about what you do outside of the academic and the studies, I think is really important, particularly when we're looking at first careers or early careers, because we're not expecting someone to walk into an interview for, let's say, a food technologist apprenticeship, which is one of our degree apprenticeships that we offer, and have 55 years worth of experience in food technology. So we're looking for someone at the start who is, fresh, is new into their career, and without a wealth of experience, bringing that kind of extracurricular, that bring yourself out in that interview and the application is really critical to making your application stand out. Be that for an employer actually, or be that for university as well. Brilliant,
thanks, Danny. And Ian, I'm not sure if you can help us here. There's a question saying, is pharmacology part of STEM?
Yes, the simple answer is yes. Pharmacology is part of STEM, and it's a very, very strict disciplinary subject. It's very, very intense, I think, but also very interesting. It tends to be, as far as I'm aware, quite vocational though, much more vocational than many other STEM subjects, but it's no reason why you couldn't use that to move into another area.
Thanks, Ian. And I've just had a question. Is psychology part of STEM? They're coming in thick and fast.
I'm not sure. I think it's not my area of expertise. I suspect it's more of a social science sort of thing, but...
Danny?
Yeah, it is a social science piece. I think it depends on how you define the science within STEM, really.
No, fair enough. And this is a good question. So due to COVID-19, Ian, this might be for you. Many people are now converting to single-use products to prevent virus transfer. Do you think you can use this compostable bag idea for other single-use products on larger scale, i.e. latex gloves?
But latex gloves are actually inherently compostable. So the problem you find is we've designed the compostable carrier bag because there's a disposal route for it. So it's designed as a food waste caddy liner, so to get a second use. But we can do that because we can label the bag and make it look like an ordinary caddy liner, and the councils accept that. What they don't accept is other compostable materials into their food waste collection generally. I mean, we're working on compostable tea bags, which they wouldn't notice the difference, except they won't cause plastic contamination. And things like fruit labels are going compostable because that's the right thing to do, because they almost certainly end up in the food waste collections. But if they see a piece of a plastic tray, they will not pull that plastic tray out of the food waste to check whether it's compostable or not. So that's where your limitation comes from. The things that are used in hospitals that are single use generally go to incineration.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Ian. Guys, obviously there are still time for a few more questions, but if you could please just in the chat box write in what you've got from this session. We are drawing it to a close shortly. Whether it's one word, one sentence, or a paragraph. It's always just great to hear, like, you know, how this session's maybe helped you. Maybe it's made you realize something different about STEM, or it's made you feel a bit more ambitious towards something in specific in STEM. It'd be great to hear from you. Ian, Danny, we've got the plenary there. I'm going to do a little bit of a poll there. But Ian, is there anything else you'd like to sort of comment on in terms of this session? I think we've been through everything regarding your sort of background and where you're at now. I suppose what's next for Ian Ferguson at the Co-op?
Well, I'm working still on packaging recyclability, film recycling at store, still engaging with councils on compostable carrier bags, and still working on food waste reduction. So one of the big things on food waste is that about 70% of the food that we waste in this country before COVID-19 was coming from households. So it's really, really important for us to engage through as many channels as we can to get households to reduce their food waste. And that's by giving people information and giving people hints and tips. And that's where STEM starts to, you start to have to talk to the marketing people who can actually turn our clever ideas into engaging ideas.
No, it's brilliant. Ian, one question I've got actually, I always like to ask this question, is obviously not in the current situation because it's sitting on your sofa or on your desk at home, but what would a normal day look like for you? Is there such a thing as a standard day when you do go back into the office?
There isn't technically a standard day. I mean, it involves driving into Manchester, and I have a range of meetings, engagement with colleagues internally, engagement with suppliers to talk about packaging, food waste, talking with my team on the projects they're working on, trying to develop strategies for how we deal with things and what we should deal with, looking for the next problem that's going to come over the horizon, because we want to preempt, forecast the problem so that it doesn't bite us in the bum. No. It's that sort of thing.
Excellent. Go on, sorry.
As queries and dealing with the media through the PR team and trying to, just trying to improve what we're doing and improve the visibility of what we're doing.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Ian. And I'm just going to recap some of the things I've seen here in the chat box. Really informative. I didn't realize how much STEM is used in retail. Thank you. The ways in which STEM roles can be used in a range of different companies. It was interesting to see the environmental work going on behind the scenes. It is encouraging to know that people are trying to make a difference. Some pretty cool stuff in here, guys. I think you can see the chat box for yourself as well. STEM subjects are universally useful for career planning. Need to do more focused research into pathways. Maybe that's into the pathways that you could go as a result of your passions there. That's fantastic. Ian, any final remarks from you? I've just launched another poll, which is at the moment 83% are saying that this session gave them good insight into examples of STEM roles and how they can work in retail. So there we are, really understanding, because I think retail, sometimes we look at that as the checkout, but it's great that we've had that insight today into actually, wow, I could go and do something like Ian and go and work at the co-op and do all the amazing things that you've achieved in STEM. Any final remarks from you, I suppose, Ian?
Two things. One is that there are a huge number of really, really important STEM roles in retail, because somebody's got to make sure that the food you're buying is safe and correct and labelled properly, and is legal, and is nutritious. There's a huge amount of work goes into producing a product. And the other thing is that the questions are really good, and there are no bad questions. They're all questions are there to try and increase knowledge. So really important to ask questions.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ian. And by the way, that's gone up now to 92% saying that this was really insightful for how they can work in a STEM role within retail. The other 8%, there it is now. The other 8% is somewhat. So we've had no one say no. Don't worry about that at all. And then I've just asked the question actually to you guys as students. Would you be interested in us continuing doing these when you go back to school or college? It's great that 67% have said yes, 33% have said maybe, and that 17% would rather it informed time. There we go, lunchtime 13%, and after school 70%. I'm just going to share these results actually, just so you can see it as well. It's just quite interesting for us to know, because we are going to continue these webinars when you go back to school or college. Danny, next week we've got one more webinar with the co-op, Why Community Matters. Anything to quickly mention on this and why students should come?
Yeah, it's a really exciting one actually. So next week, next Thursday, 2 till 3, we are running a session with Pete Valens, who's one of our member pioneer managers, and he'll tell you all about what that role means. We'll be talking about what a cooperative is. So shedding a little bit of light into a different business model than you might usually be familiar with, what we stand for, how we cooperate within our communities, and what we want to do is bring to life the amazing work our teams have been doing, and importantly, our communities have been doing in and around COVID-19. And we've got some really interesting stories actually where we can talk about the different roles that we have within community and how you can access a career in community and in the kind of the charity section as such. And for those who are between over the age of 16, there's even a potential opportunity for you to come and work with us in that member pioneer role. We'll talk about what that means next week. So yeah, don't miss out. It's a really great opportunity to learn about what we actually are as a co-op, what we do, and really might bring to life some of the amazing work that Ian's done and kind of the driving factor behind that, linking to being cooperative for our members and our communities.
Fantastic. Thank you, Danny. And we'll be there next week. And Ian, I'm just going to close off with this remark from Holly. Good to hear such an interesting career story. This webinar has made me realize the diverse number of roles within a company. I'd really like to thank Ian, your time, and Danny, your time. I'm just going to close off with the students now in terms of talking about the activities and stuff we've got happening next week. But thank you very much for joining.
Thanks for listening. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good luck, all.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.
Okay, and guys, I just wanted to mention a few things that we've talked about here on the polls. Tomorrow, we've got a webinar with Gail Ems, who's an Olympian. So she's won like a silver medal at the Olympics. So I'm just going to be interviewing her and finding out how she became so successful and what she was really focused on in her career. I did it last week with someone, Hannah Wilkes from Sky Sports. I don't know if anyone was on that webinar, but it was great, like persistence, hard work, how to get work experience, how to nail the interview and really get to where you want to get to, regardless of politics and competition. So I suppose tomorrow with the Olympian Gail, it'll be really interesting to find out how she became so successful. I've put a few links in here, guys. So we've put the link in for the co-op webinar next week. You'll see also I put a quick survey. Please do that. Take you 2 minutes, just in terms of how you found the session today. And just finally, thanks very much for getting back to me on when you would like these sessions when you go back to school or college. I'm getting 4, 5 o'clock or later, 5 p.m., 4:30. So I suppose when you've finished and maybe when you've got time to go home. So that's good to know as well. Great. Any more questions for me? And I'll be happily ask them. Danny, was there anything else on here?
No, I don't think so. Thanks
I
everyone
think
for your
well, there are a few more, Danny, if you've got the time.
All right, okay. Yeah, of course.
We've got for STEM jobs, what is considered more important in general, the welfare of people, or the increase of monetary wealth, i.e., profit? We need Ian back.
Yeah. No, so I think that's very much, it's less about the job, more about the company.
Yep.
So if you're in the right company, so the co-op, for example, we don't, and Ian didn't touch on it actually, for those who are still logged in. We created a compostable carrier bag. We then gave it to all of our competitors for free. We gave it out, the whole pattern, the technology, everything we'd spent probably a lot of money and time and effort developing. We gave it to our competitive supermarkets and retailers for free, because we actually know as a business that there is a massive environmental impact that we can make with this product. And that's the kind of company which would definitely be looking at the welfare of its community and its people, its environment, over profits. But what I would always say is we are still a business, and it's most important that we balance the books as such. So we're not creating products, and businesses aren't creating products to make a lot of money on them. But yeah, it depends on the company that you work for.
Thanks, Danny.
And we've got, does food waste get converted to biofuels? That's without Ian's expertise, from what I understand. It depends on where that waste is sent to. So if it's food waste and the council have a partnership with a biofuel company, then yes, it would get converted to biofuels. Depends on what the food waste is. But on the whole, it's usually not necessary into biofuels as such. It's more the compostable stuff.
Good stuff. And finally, Danny, I'll ask you this. Do you listen to podcasts? Shaw is asking.
Yes, I do actually. There's 2 really good podcasts that I listen to. One's called TED Ed, which is an educational version of the TEDx talks. And I listen to both of them. One, because I think the TED Ed ones are really good at simplifying kind of those real big topics in society. TEDx talks are really interesting because there's some real future thinking topics on there. I think TEDx talks are probably a little bit more in depth in terms of their topics, but still quite short, but a little bit more kind of deeper. But yeah, I listened to, and apart from that, the Peter Crouch podcast. That's irrelevant for this webinar.
I do listen to that as well. I've just got a comment here from Shaw saying Ian was a legend. Ian was great on that webinar, wasn't he, today?
Ian is a legend. He's a legend of co-op. He's a really great guy, and I just hope that everyone that's heard his story today takes a little bit of something away from it, because he's got a lot to share. And hopefully, you know, that STEM piece, his story about his educational route and the amazing work that him and his team are doing here at Co-op is so much we're helpful to helping you guys actually, you know, link into and engage with STEM careers, because it's something that we need to improve on as a country, and yourselves, be that yourselves as students, or actually be that as teachers as well. It's really important that we encourage individuals to go into STEM, but importantly, break down some of those myths around it not necessarily being in a lab with a white coat. You can do STEM anywhere, and you can definitely do it within a retailer, such as a co-op.
Definitely. No, that's brilliant. And look, we've got the resources that Danny gave us on that slide. We're going to send around the recording tonight, guys, so you can look at all those resources. And remember, if you email into student@pathwayctm on the screen there, we'll always get back in touch with you and try and help you out. Danny, your STEM roles, I guess, do you have any more for 2020, or are you looking at 2021 now for those year 12s and 11s who are?
A bit of a mix, yeah. So we've got, we actually do have one. It's not launched yet. It's coming down the track, which is a really interesting one, actually. So it's a level 4 in data. And whilst you might think, oh, what does that mean? It's actually within our robotics team. So that's not necessarily actual physical kind of robots as such, but robots which sit within our software in our system to make our way of working quicker. And we have an apprenticeship in that team. And we've just finished recruitment for our very first food technology degree apprentice. And I very much expect that to be a permanent fixture now within our annual recruitment. So keep an eye on our webpage, go to jobs.coop.co.uk, register your interest at the bottom of the page under apprenticeships. And then every time we release an apprenticeship or any information about apprenticeships, you'll be pinged an email with the information or the application link on there. And just keep an eye out, really.
Danny, would you mind emailing me that link and we'll put it in the follow-up to everybody?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Brilliant. Well, I'm off to another webinar now. We're doing one at 3:30. We've got 4 apprentices from Berkeley Homes looking into different trades in construction. So a little bit different from this talk. But Danny, what's your afternoon looking like?
Busy. Yeah, busy. Planning a lot of things for our academies, careers events online, and work experience as well. So yeah, really exciting stuff.
Great. Well, thanks for your time, Danny, and have a good afternoon.
Fantastic. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.